Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of OP Radio. My name is Mac. I'm a content strategist at OP Labs. I am your host at OP Radio. We have another great show for you lined up this week. This week's guest, well, he needs no introduction, but I will introduce him nonetheless. The beloved Binji. To know him is to love him. He's a friend. He's a colleague. Good morning, Binji. How are you doing?
GM, I'm doing fantastic. I'm in New York and it's actually sunny after like 3 days of rain. So doing great. GM, everybody. Buenos dias, guten tag, all the rest of the greetings. Namaste. Hope you guys are all good.
You're flexing on me, Binji. It's not sunny where I am. It's raining. But I'm glad to hear you have good weather, at least.
But you're in a beautiful place that doesn't charge egregious rent. So who's winning, really?
That's true. But that's your fault. We've talked about this episode. Okay, so I think I'm super excited to talk with Binji today. It's going to be probably a little bit more even more casual than usual, and I think the conversation is going to be quite wide ranging. So let's just have some fun with it. Binji, I know there's a lot of stuff that we'll probably get into. I thought to kick us off, how about something topical, something that was on the timeline recently, which is, I don't know if you saw this video, but it was a deep fake video featuring Mr. Vitalik Buterin, and he was talking about an exchange and a coin, but it turns out this was not actually Vitalik. This was a deep fake. And wow, what interesting times we find ourselves in, where with the proliferation and the advancements in AI, I think it's going to be harder and harder. We're going to see more and more of these videos and audios, and it's going to become harder and harder to distinguish them from the real deal. So, Binji, what do you think about this? Do we need to be concerned? And what, if anything, do you think the solution to this could be?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's actually one of the more scary things that are happening in the world. That's going to happen. That is already happening, it seems like. I think it's an evolution of the internet that I don't think we're fully prepared for. And I think there's only one way to truly attempt to fix it. I'll go into that in more detail later, but essentially, like, deepfakes are going to be a thing, whether we like it or not. It's going to get easier and easier to create a deepfake. There will be deepfakes of everybody all around proliferated, especially like as election season comes in and such things like emerge. Like, there's actually a massive incentive for bad actors to create deepfakes and misinform the public. I tend to say that, like, the most valuable currency in the world is not Bitcoin, is not Ethereum, it's not the US dollar. The most valuable currency in the world is attention. And a lot of people's attention is gone towards social media right now. And right now, most of the content on social media is human generated. And for the most part, it's humans. But now you can actually create these like deep fakes. So you're getting this most valuable currency and you're almost altering how people, where people pay it and what people pay it to. And you won't be able to distinguish if it's a deep fake or not. The voice stuff is happening now with AI as well. Like, you can imitate voices really easily. It's literally, there's consumer apps that do this. So you can imagine the threat there as misinformation becomes more like widespread. I think the starkest allusion to this is probably, the election interference stuff that people spoke about, I believe in 2016, where it's like, okay, like, humans are creating all these bots and creating fake content. Well, bots can create more bots than any human ever could. And you could basically have that same thing multiplied by an order of magnitude, 100 times more pretty much, and much more realistic and much more believable, even to the analytical eye. I think it's really easy to get fooled. I think it'll be easier to get fooled as well. And I think we should be increasingly careful. And I think a big solution to that is actually, funny enough, like this thing called blockchains. You can create these attestations, you can do these proof of humanity mechanisms. And I do think that's actually going to be a really important topic, not just for like the crypto world that we live in today, but just like the online world that we will all live in tomorrow as well. My views on that are, I prefer neutrality over everything. So I'm a big fan of like, I'm a fan that people are innovating within that space. Like, people have different ways. There's different proof of humanity mechanisms. Some are like, they do the social web thing and they prove your humanity based off like your on-chain actions. Some literally have an orb that scans your eyes, and like, there's a myriad of these solutions. My perspective on this is like, I think it's okay to have all of these different solutions. I do not think there should be one solution only that everyone picks, but I do think there should be a neutral layer on which everyone's making these attestations. And that kind of draws me. We work pretty closely with the EAS team. Steve and Bryce over there are excellent. And I think one thing I really like about their approach is they're just creating a very neutral, eternal public good layer where anyone can create attestations. So WorldCoin, if they can put attestations there. Coinbase ID can put attestations there. Other Optimist NFTs can put attestations there, and users are left with a choice on how they prove their humanity, essentially. And with mechanisms like that, you can almost tie that into social media, and that could be a part of the rise of Web3 social in a way. Is oh, every single thing that's posted here is actually posted by a real human and is actually human generated. I think that could actually make a pretty big difference in a world that's filled with bots. Those are some of my opinions. Happy to dive deeper into any of those, but yeah, I think it's a real threat in many ways. But I'm optimistic that we can find a solution, and I'm very, very I want to try to press that solution as much as possible, because I'd much prefer that proof of humanity solution comes from a decentralized entity versus a centralized source. And optionality should be kept very open as well, because identity is not black and white. Identity is not just your eyeball. It's your name, your high school diploma, the t-shirts that you wear, the stuff that you like, the dates that you go on. All these things are part of your identity. So yeah, we want to make sure we can actually put that online, be able to verify that, but also maintain privacy over one's self, essentially.
Yeah, it seems to me that it's very important to have a credible and neutral permissionless platform in order to make these attestations, if you will, about what is or isn't real, right? Otherwise, if you're relying on some sort of central authority, well, you're kind of back to square one, right? You're putting all that power in the hands of one entity to be the gatekeeper and the arbiter of truth, which I don't really think is a step forward.
Definitely. I think a lot of this thing is as we build on decentralized principles, we need to make sure the thing that we are building is either has a really strong path towards decentralization or starts out as decentralized as possible. Because I think we've seen so many times, I don't think anyone ever sets out to do something bad. I think, people say the path to hell is paved with good intentions. I think a lot of people have very good intentions. I think everyone is innately a good human being. But as people push towards our vision, sometimes folks can get tunnel visioned a little bit and just end up doing things that are actually net negative. So yeah, being able to decentralize that away from a lot of human control and decision making, I think is helpful. I think smart contracts could help with that. Obviously, where you just humans can agree on a contract, but the execution of that contract is done by the contract itself versus involving too many cooks who can have large decision making power. So yeah, I'm optimistic. I think it's something that's burgeoning, and I know a lot of people in the audience as well are working towards fixing some of this stuff. So
something else you mentioned, Binji, that I thought was interesting. I spoke with the initial question more to the increasing quality of these deep fakes. So they're more convincing than ever. And then you brought up the fact that the quality of these. So there's not only are they more convincing than ever, but there's just a proliferation of them. There's more and more of these than ever. And it seemed like you were suggesting that you could have a bot create a bot. So you could have an AI or a fake entity basically reproduce itself, which is a pretty interesting and frightening proposition. So yeah, I just wanted to point out that it seems like the quality, both of those seem to be increasing of these fake.
Yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy, I guess, where you have the quality of these deep fakes increasing. They're increasingly realistic, but you have the quality of the attention that people are giving to analyzing what they see actually decreasing, right? Because we're flooded with so much content that people don't pay attention to every single video that they watch with as much attention as they would have paid to a newspaper, an article that they were reading. It's 60-second videos, in, out, and information just you're just getting swarmed with this content, so you're not paying a lot of attention. The quality of your attention is reduced, whereas the quality of the content and the fake content is increased. So people are just are quick to believe things that they see online and just form a quick judgment around them. The other scary part with that is also where is this content being housed? Right now it's being housed on Web2 platforms. And how do Web2 platforms work? Well, they monetize through ads. And the irony here is pretty bewildering for me, but essentially you have these platforms that have these deep fakes on them. These platforms make money by ads, that the amount of ads that a user sees directly correlates with the amount of money a platform makes. The platform has the incentive to make you see as many ads as possible. It makes you see as many ads as possible by continuing to feed you content that it thinks is addictive to you. And they have like PhD researchers, like cognitive scientists, behavioral scientists, just like literally working on this algorithm to create like, okay, how can I make sure that Binji or Mac just stays on this platform? How can I give them as much content as possible that they continue scrolling, they continue swiping, they continue like, just reading all of this stuff. And I think the incentive almost with the quality of these deepfakes rising for these Web2 companies to stop it is actually minimal, because it's like, okay, if deepfake content makes the average user use Twitter more or use Instagram more or use TikTok more, then why would Instagram stop that? Like they're making a lot of money through it. And that's a scary world to get into, where essentially we're all getting increasingly polarized, where increasingly like misinformation is just spreading, and all for what? Like for Chipotle ads or McDonald's ads, right? Like it's kind of ironic that like the potential fall of like humanization online can be driven by literally burgers. And I think there's like a big fight for crypto and blockchains to be able to push against that and create a much more neutral web that's less driven by ad revenue.
Yeah, we talk a lot about incentive alignment at Optimism, right? And that's a huge piece of Retro PGF is realigning those incentives. I really think that, where the incentives are, that's the direction that people will head in. And so, yeah, that's an interesting point that maybe perhaps in these Web2 platforms, the incentives are not quite aligned for them to combat these deep fakes. Yeah, it's something you said also about, these platforms optimizing for basically advertising. I think there's this meme that's floated around. It's like the greatest minds of our generation have spent the last decade sort of optimizing ads on Facebook. And so I think that's taken us to quite an interesting place. But okay, so enough about maybe the problems. I'd love to, keep it optimistic here after all. So I wonder if we could talk a little bit more about Binji, how you think blockchain could potentially solve this. Like where do you see this going in the future?
Yeah, I think the more stuff that we bring on chain, we can build more reputation around it. Like I said, like I think a lot of identity is not just like, it's not just one thing. Your identity is a mixture of things, and you have various identities. I'm different with my high school friends versus who I am with like someone I meet at a crypto conference, probably. I can't be pigeonholed into, okay, this is the one Binji, because we're multifaceted people and like species as a whole. So I think like the way to fix this is, if we can bring more things on chain, there's more ways to pull in your various different types of identities, and you should be able to opt in to the way you want to express yourself through those identities. You can create a kind of the social web, and that's one of the core thinkings behind like the attestation stuff that Optimism's doing with EAS and such, where it's like, how can we get like privacy preserving attestations and on-chain data essentially for all the people who are interacting with blockchains, and how can we allow others to compose on top of that data and build out certain things. So it's like maybe Farcaster or a Farcaster client takes in a bunch of these attestations, says like, okay, the people who have XYZ attestations are human, and we will let only them post videos on our platform. Now you have like, okay, this is human posted videos. And I think you can get like layers deeper as well, where like, I can be a human, I can post a video, but I can still post a deep fake. How do you go one layer deeper where like the video's metadata itself is like, attested to in some regard to be like, okay, this is real, like this was shot in real life, this was not edited. And I think there's interesting ways to maneuver around that. There are many solutions, but I can't pinpoint like this is going to be the exact fix. I think the biggest power to getting to fixing this is like just providing the right tooling and the access for someone to come and feel like they can fix it. And like that's kind of a general take I have in crypto, where like the biggest superpower of crypto may not necessarily be like the underlying superpower may not necessarily be one app or one protocol, but it's the fact that you can have access to innovate within certain realms that you previously would not have had access to. For example, I'm sure Instagram is working on their own solution to this problem, but that's happening in a closed web that only Instagram can use. Whereas through crypto, like a lot of this stuff is done in the open, where yes, you can have multiple attestations, but anyone can kind of come and build on top of those and source from this social web. of like, immutable data essentially. So I think the power is, let's bring more stuff on chain. Let's keep it as privacy preserving as possible. Let's get users to opt in to whichever one that they want and always know where their data is, what it's being housed. It doesn't have to be personally identifying either. So ways to get around that. And then let's keep this as open as possible. Let's keep it as a public good, which is why I like EAS personally. And let anyone build on top of it. You should feel free to try out your own identity solutions. You should feel free to try out your own social media platforms and like still be connected with the broader data that's available across the blockchain in an open way. So I think we're nearing that point a little more, where it's like, let's get more stuff on chain. And then the composability element is also very key to enabling that to reach the next level.
Yeah, this goes back to the power of open source, which is a recurring theme on OP Radio. But yeah, open source, having all this be open source, which enables you to crowdsource the solution to a lot of these problems. And, I'm very hopeful. I think along with these problems sort of seemingly right now, they seem to be proliferating. They seem to be getting pretty bad. I think along with that, right, you will have an equal and opposite reaction. So I'm hopeful that because this is ostensibly, at least from my perspective, it's getting worse. I think we're likely to see a solution or a variety of solutions come on chain soon.
Agreed. And I think one thing that's interesting is like we talk a lot about like mass adoption, like the institutions are coming, like that sort of stuff. And I think on the real, like, crypto has a PR problem, right? Like people, when an everyday person thinks about crypto, they're thinking about getting rugged or a hack that they heard about or something. But I think what will actually be a massive shift in sentiment, probably the biggest shift in crypto sentiment, is when people realize that the current ways that they're doing things, like the current incumbent social media platforms and such, are failing them. Or there's bots everywhere. It's actually become like a terrible place to be. People build entire careers off of these platforms, and suddenly they're completely blocked. And I think that's when crypto can kind of shine a light on its value prop of like, hey, like, you're not. For example, a nice equivalent I think is, let's look at like Farcaster versus Instagram. If I can only choose one front end for Instagram, I can only choose whatever Mark Zuckerberg is putting out for the world. And all credits to Facebook. Like, it's really changed my life. I can connect with a lot of my friends. I add a lot of people that I meet on Instagram, and it's nice to like kind of be able to follow them. But I'm realizing, okay, now when I'm on Instagram, I'm just seeing ads. I'm just seeing reels. I don't see a single post from my friend. I don't want that experience, but I can't change that. I can't go and like create my own front end for Instagram. Whereas let's take Farcaster, for example. Let's say I do the same. I have all my friends. I add everyone on Farcaster. And maybe one day, like one Farcaster client that I've been using is just like suddenly rife with ads or rife with certain content that I don't want to see. Well, I'm not stuck with that. I can actually just move to another client. I still get all of my friends. I don't have to start from scratch. And I can just use this other client. I'm still using the underlying Farcaster protocol. I'm still using I'm still pouring in from the same like social web essentially. And I can choose optionality wise of like how I view my data and how I view my experience in general. I think that's very powerful as people want more choice, especially as the digital realm like encompasses more of our lives. So I think that's another like really, really massive value prop that if we get it right, I think that could actually shift the public perception of what crypto has to offer holistically.
Yeah, this is something that Mark Tyneway mentioned when we had him on OP Radio, which is this ability to opt out of these systems. So I think that's what distinguishes a lot of these cryptographic systems, is just as you said, Binji, if you don't like Instagram and the way it's run, well, you're not really left with a lot of different options. But what Binji is describing is, well, these platforms, when it comes to crypto, they're open source. They can be easily forked. In fact, you're encouraged to do so. And so you can go ahead and create your own thing, or just join another thing that someone else has created if you think the grass is greener over there. So yeah, I think that's a very powerful idea, right? This ability to opt out if you want to.
Agree. And I think it's going to be like, I'm trying to work around these analogies. I personally like, I love analogies. I think I may overuse them sometimes, and they're a work in progress every time. But one thing that I'm kind of trying to wrap around is, two analogies that I'm trying to wrap around with things like Farcaster, like crypto kind of entering this more social realm now, and this more consumer facing realm, is one, the meta concept is like blockchains are digital oxygen, because we're going to get more digital. The metaverse is probably going to happen at some point in the next like 20, 30 years, maybe less. Where it's not like I'm going to stop, my screen time's not going to go any lower, right? Like it probably will increase, but I should touch more grass anyway, side note. But basically, blockchains as digital oxygen is the idea that in the real world, oxygen is a free open resource. No one can take my oxygen from me. I don't have to pay a subscription to breathe. It's just there. In the digital world, as we get more and more into the digital world, as that encompasses our lives more, there is no digital oxygen in this Web2 realm. Like, you are fed the subscription service thing that you are paying Twitter. You are fed this front end that Instagram is giving you. You're getting this metaverse realm that Apple has control over. You can build your entire life. You can live, breathe with permission in many ways. So blockchains and digital oxygen is kind of like this concept that if we are going to be in this world that's like fully virtual, we need a neutral way to live and survive, and thus like blockchains kind of allow for that to exist. If I don't like this one thing, I can.
I was just going to say,
without losing the thing.
Yeah, I was just going to say that clean air is absolutely a public good. So, Binji, something that came up in a conversation we've had before is we were speaking, and I mentioned the fact that one of the things that makes me so optimistic about crypto is actually how pessimistic I am about legacy institutions. I basically, there's countless examples of how they're currently failing us. I'm curious, what makes you most optimistic about crypto, or what are you optimistic about?
Yeah, I think access is the term I find myself getting back to a lot. Where for me, crypto has always been access. The way I got into crypto was because of a lack of access that I had for essentially like money transfers globally. And it's always been like a stark thing for me. It's like, okay, what can crypto give to people who previously could not have it?
I've heard you mention before, I think you tweeted something recently, that crypto doesn't have a UX problem. It has a product problem. I wonder if you could elaborate on what you meant there.
Yeah, this actually ties into the other answer as well. So you asked like what makes me optimistic about crypto, and I was basically answering with like access. I think crypto provides access. I think the most successful crypto to date have been access oriented. So in a way, like stable coins give you access to a currency that you would not have had access to in a global setting. Payments gives you access to sending money around the world to other people permissionlessly. NFTs, as an artist, as a creator, you get access to a global marketplace. And a lot of it's like access oriented. You can argue like friend tag gives you access to people, right? Like you can get into someone's chat, get their attention. So I think the part where product comes in is if you build a product that people want to use, that gives people access to something that they did not have before, or makes an existing action that they do daily better, then that is successful. And I believe that the UX issues will matter less. Like if I have to onboard somebody to use an obscure thing that they don't want to use, but they use it because, oh, maybe I'll get free airdrop for it, then it's like, they'll probably drop off the second that the UX problem comes in. But if I build something that is actually appealing to people, it's actually interesting, that goes beyond just like financial speculation, it's genuinely a fun product to use, people are less likely to turn because the UX to get there is bad. It's like, I think people climb mountains and people go through like crazy terrain because the end result is worth it. And if we create products where the end result is actually worth it and it gives you something that you would not have had before, then the UX almost becomes secondary. So I see this like narrative around crypto where it's like, oh, we will have great UX and then the products will be built. But I would argue that like the best UX is built in conjunction with the product itself. Like you launch a product that people want, people start using it, you learn their behavior and you're like, oh, okay, maybe I should add this UX feature or that UX feature. Whereas if you're just building UX features without a product to cater to, then it's like you're kind of just thinking on your own and thinking what everybody wants. And I think that no one really knows what they want anyway, but the best way to find out is through testing and like letting them at least act. So I think crypto does have a product problem. We just need more things that people want to use. And I think the excuse in a way of using like UX is an issue as a result of those products not existing is almost like, antithetical to the actual growth long term. So I'm excited to see like apps now move into just like, let's just launch with the beta. Everything doesn't have to be perfect. We don't have to have everything tip top, and we can progressively get better UX over time. Teams that can move really fast in that way and just experiment, launch stuff, see how it feels, and then continue building, I think are positioned for a lot of success in the industry. And especially like it's probably the industry's best hope of getting like the mass adoption realm. Teams I want to highlight for that is like one, like Farcaster. When Farcaster was starting, they just launched, and there was a bunch of early users and they built a community, and then they just like continued iterating, adding features. Warpcast had this update and that update, and the protocol had this thing built and that thing built. And it wasn't just the core protocol folks building it. There was actually other people building on top of it, even in the early stages. And you kind of get this like cool community of active developers as well as like users testing your product. And now the UX is getting better and better. Another one is like Friendtech as well. Like the Friendtech first app like a month ago was a certain type of UI, and every single week almost there's a new change, there's a new feature, things get renamed, things are like altered, there's like a new distribution mechanism. Like all of these things are iteration. And I think that is actually really important to have more of in the space, where if we can just help incentivize people to just build fun products, fun games, fun examples, like proof of concept, and then we encourage people to try to test them out and solicit feedback. Not only will it help the team itself with their product, but it could also help all these other UX teams like wallets and such understand user behavior more, and thus we can actually paint a full picture. I think like in a way, like optimizing too much on what is the ideal user flow is putting the cart before the horse. I believe it needs to be done in conjunction with like product itself that people actually want to use.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I think good UX is valuable insofar as it fits under a good product that people actually want to use. And this kind of reminds me of this, age-old argument of, well, people don't really care about decentralization. Some do and some don't. The idea is that they don't need to, but building these apps on a decentralized foundation where that is abstracted away from the user. So they're kind of getting the best of both worlds. They're getting that amazing experience with the app. And then on the back end, it is decentralized and they're getting all those benefits as well, but they don't really need to worry or think about that. And they certainly do not need to experience worse UX just because it's built on a decentralized infrastructure.
Definitely. And I think when it comes to UX, I see Will Fukuri in the audience. He's a huge inspiration for me in like the way he thinks. He works at OP Lab, on the DevX team, and has built a bunch of stuff in Ethereum. Will actually was one of the first people to create a PWA, like in I think 2018 or something. So he's really on top of all of this. And he mentions this idea of like developer UX matters as well a lot. It's like if we build really good DevX and really good tooling, and we almost abstract some of the complexities of blockchains for developers, then we can actually have a wide influx of people, even outside of crypto, just easily be able to integrate some of these solutions that blockchains provide and some of these mechanisms and structures that blockchains provide. And that goes to this philosophy of like, I think the overemphasis on building the next new thing is overemphasized. I think you don't always have to build a new shiny thing. You can actually just polish old things that are not shiny and make them better. And I think that is actually something that smart contracts can offer if people can build it right. And I think having really good developer UX, and that's the core emphasis on for Optimism. One of the biggest like advantages I think of the OP stack and the super chain is just like, let's create a uniform stack that anyone can use, anyone can build on top of, and anyone can like kind of play the positive sum game with if they opt in to join the super chain. And I think getting these pieces together is actually really critical, where let's think about like developer UX as much as we think about user UX, because it's almost like the DevX comes first. And I'm excited to see like things like the Bastion protocol that recently raised with Andreessen, where their entire thing is like, let's integrate smart contracts with legacy businesses. And let's just, utilize the power of blockchains for things that are inefficient today. And if you look around the world, there's like massive businesses that are doing like so much in volume. There's massive untapped opportunity where you can kind of see a lot of the ways that they currently operate. and quite literally say like crypto fixes this, like no pun intended, like it literally does. So I think combination of like developer UX and user UX is going to be a big catalyst for like the next upcoming wave. And I think part of this is also education. It's one of the reasons I joined Optimism was because like there is a massive for $1 trillion industry, like multiple trillions of dollars in the peak. The amount of money that's been spent on education is absolutely appalling. Like it's one of the reasons why we have a PR problem. It's one of the reasons why people think crypto is just memes and rugs. It's because there's no amount of money spent to anybody, and there's no incentivization for anybody to go and be like, let's create a massive education campaign for crypto and re-inform people about what it is. If I Google crypto today, I just see buy this coin, buy that coin. It doesn't talk about blockchain. It doesn't talk about a lot of the other work that we've kind of been talking about in this OP radio session. Like, I think that's one of the reasons I joined Optimism, is because with public goods, if we actually retroactively fund people who feel incentivized to build stuff like that, that plays into DevX, that plays into discovery, that plays into user experience over time as well. So yeah, this is kind of, I don't know where I'm going to end this sentence, but you can just say I'm optimistic about UX as something that goes in conjunction with the product itself. And I think UX is multifaceted across like developers and users. And I think developers come first to initially kickstart things. So really, like, big shout out to all the people who are working on like really core DevX stuff, like AVMTS, VM, like all of that stuff is really, really key to unlock the next wave of people who can build complete new things, not just complete new things, but also like kind of help polish some of these old world technologies, I guess.
Yeah, well, you're so right to point out the DevX experience. Often because I'm not a dev myself, I sort of approach things from the user perspective, but you're absolutely correct to point that out. And I have heard that Optimism has excellent DevX. And another thing that, I would be remiss if I didn't point out, this seems like an opportune time to mention that sign up for Retro PGF 3 is open right now. We're in the sign up window. It closes October 23rd. So that's 30 million OP to the developers, the builders, but not just them, also content creators, educators. So I really encourage anyone, if you've contributed to the Optimism Collective in any of these ways, maybe even some I haven't mentioned, go and sign up. Just go to the Optimism Twitter and you'll find all the information there. But yeah, deadline's October 23rd, and just an absolutely massive opportunity. And if you haven't contributed to the collective, well, the good news is this is the third round of Retro PGF, and we plan on doing a lot more. So that opportunity still exists. As they say, the best time to start, if you haven't already, is right now. So I'd encourage you all to go out there and, get involved in this thing. It's kind of like we were talking about before. Right now, there's so many changes occurring at such a rapid pace with technology. And there's the opportunity in crypto and at Optimism to just start building the next version. So opt out of that system if you find that it's not really suiting you, if it's not really to your advantage, and join this other one, because there's plenty of other people who would love to have you. And with Retro PGF, you'll even get rewarded for it. You're incentivized to do so.
Yep. It's really fascinating. Can I drop an analogy, Mac, on RPGF?
Absolutely, please.
So, okay, like if you close your eyes, just imagine you're a fisherman in a village, and the entire village, everyone there is like, they fish. That's how their income in the village works. And everyone uses this one pond that everyone goes to. And I'm going to talk in like the current context of the world, and then I'm going to talk in the current on the context that I think RPGF is building. So let's say you're this village fisherman. One day you decide, okay, I don't want to fish here. I'm just going to take a walk. And you see this like kind of medium-sized pond, and you're like, okay, fuck it, let's try it. So you go to this pond and you start fishing, and you suddenly realize you're pulling out like some of this like most exotic fish in the world are here. Wow, like that's great. You go back to your village. Now you're making a lot more money because you can sell all this stuff, and it's more exotic. And everyone's like, "Oh my god, where did this person find it?" And eventually, you're doing this for a week. Eventually, everyone else catches on, and they also start going to the pond. Now you have all the village fishermen in this new pond where they're pulling out exotic fish. Like it's raining exotic fish in this area, and some of the villagers start competing. Some of them like start collaborating. Some of them may like get ships. They go to a bank. The bank easily gives them a loan because now there's a profit incentive. It's like, oh wow, this fish is like fine. Like, of course, here, take a loan out on the ship. And now you have these like massive ships in this pond area, and like they're exporting to Brazil, they're exporting to Turkey, they're going to New York, like it's on sushi tables in Manhattan. It's like this fish is getting everywhere, getting really, really popular. All of this village is getting a lot of money. It's great. They're like continue to extract from this pond, and everyone's really happy, and everyone's leveraged up on a bunch of loans because banks are easily going to give loans to something that has a profit vehicle at the end, a clear line of monetization at the end. And it's going great. It's music everywhere. One day though, there's no more fish. People start pulling out this fish, and it's like, wow, these are deformed. There's no fish at all. Shit. Now after we pay the loans, now everyone's broke. That is essentially the reality of a lot of things. It's called like a multipolar trap. Essentially, it's also called like a tragedy of the commons, where when there's a resource that is to be extracted that can provide a profit, people will continuously extract and go, keep extracting and spend so much money, like a lot of money on the extraction of the thing. And zero money is usually spent on the maintenance of that thing as well, on the other hand. So what if in the same reality, you have, sure, people can go extract fish, like keep doing that, get your bag, sure. But the other thing is, what if like during that point, there's also this pot of funding that comes in through part of this extraction, so some of the fees earned from like the selling of the fish, that goes in this massive pot that acts as an incentive vehicle, which says, hey, if you help maintain this pond, if you actually spend your time like going in, cleaning, making sure the fish are like bred properly, they're fine, they're healthy, you can retroactively, after you've proven this impact, get this money, get this like reward, sorry. So essentially what happens there is people can extract, it's great for the village, but now people are also incentivized to like clean the pond. And because the sum of money is getting larger and larger, and the incentive potential reward payout is getting larger and larger, even more people are incentivized to clean the pond. Because now it's massive. It's like, wow, huge, right? So you get some of the smartest minds working on this. You get some of the smartest minds competing with each other on it too. It's like my pond cleaning team versus your pond cleaning team. And we've kind of seen in this realm of like the current incentive structures of the world that like competition's good. It makes you better, right? Like I'm happy that there's multiple roll-ups in the world, because that pushes us all like further, all for Ethereum. It's great. So now you have this high efficient competition on who can clean the pond the most, because there's this incentive structure, and people can continue fishing and the village is prosperous. So that, in my mind, like that's a lot to do with Retro PJF, where like if you can let people build apps, let people do stuff on a network, but also make sure that you can fund the people who are doing things that don't necessarily generate a profit right away, that are like, you don't get paid directly for cleaning the pond, but you can get a big reward after you've proven your impact. The retroactive element's important, again, because like otherwise, if someone with a nice pitch deck can just come and say, hey, give me a massive government contract to clean this pond, and then they get the contract that they do nothing, that's the failure case of like in upfront funding. But retroactively, you can create this incentive flywheel where it actually, in a case, it might actually be more profitable for someone to go and do the pond cleaning than actually fish themselves. So that sort of model that we push out into the world, we're going to start with Optimism, Superchain. We're going to start with those public goods, but it's almost like a economic model that we can prove out to the world that like, hey, if you actually fund public goods, if you actually fund things where that benefits everybody but doesn't directly generate a profit, everybody benefits in the long term. And I think that's some of the things that we practiced with these retro PJF rounds, and with the way like the blockchains are structured and the way the super chain is structured. And I'm really excited to see how that plays out over time as well. And perhaps there's a future in which this enters the real world, like meat space as well. So it's exciting to be a part of that.
Yeah, so I like that. So it's providing like a more sustainable economic model for the pond cleaners in this example. And their work benefits everybody, right? So they do deserve to be rewarded for the valuable work they're providing. As you mentioned, often this doesn't happen because maybe they aren't rewarded in some of these other systems. And so they're going to be much quicker to just do what everybody else is doing, extract the resources as quickly as possible. It's kind of, there's a couple different dichotomies operating here. There's this positive sum mentality versus a more extractive model. There's the short-term versus the long-term incentives. So what you seem to be describing, Binji, is this more sort of long-term outlook and the realization that, hey, we need to be good stewards of this pond. Otherwise, the game's going to end.
Exactly. And it also creates more games. You have a clean pond. Now, this pond exotic fish business is doing great. Now, other people are coming for tours. Now, people are setting up entire tourist agencies. There's another way for people to make money through the village. It's not just this resource. It opens up the doors to like a lot more stuff. And through retro funding, through ending this financial martyrdom for doing things that benefit the collective itself is more prosperous. And essentially, we can actually realign some of these ways in which even investment works, where maybe now no one would, the bank was never going to give a loan to a pond cleaner before, but because a pond cleaner could potentially get this reward sum, maybe the bank does give a loan now because the bank's like, oh, this person could potentially get this. A lot of venture funding is a bet on the person and the founders. It's a big bet on the founders. And a lot of times, and even art, right? Like even you find a lot of artists who struggle to monetize because they're like, damn, I have to monetize to get an initial funding. I have to figure out a way to monetize, and that could pollute the art itself. Like, because people get so fixed on how can I monetize this to even start the thing versus actually just doing the thing and like letting their passion spread. On education and crypto, like there's no one who's focusing on. There's very few people who are focusing on like, let me create mass scale educational content, and it's because no one's funding that content. Like, there's no direct economic impact on that content. It's why people get pressure to launch a token, and then like that kind of also has its massive share of problems and such things. That I think one of the ways that Optimism and the collective is like changing that is through these massive rounds of essentially a new incentive structure that has a much more longer term outlook and creates this idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention that we're certainly not reinventing the wheel here, right? I think the key point here is just sort of realigning the incentives. It's very hard if you tell people, oh, you need to clean this pond because it's going to be better for everybody. They're going to say, okay, well, what's in it for me, right? I don't think it's a very prudent decision to rely on altruism to drive these mechanisms forward. Instead, let's just utilize, we understand more or less how human nature works. People are driven by incentives. So let's give them that incentive. Let's give them an incentive to build and create a more positive sum future for all of us. And I think everybody will benefit.
100%.
I just want to mention that because I think, with the name itself, with the terms public goods being in retroactive public goods funding, I think the connotation there, a lot of people go, oh, this is like a nonprofit. This is sort of like this sort of feel goody thing. It's like, well, not really. If you look at it, it's just realigning the incentives and it's rewarding people for a lot of work that typically goes unrewarded.
Yep. And it like on a long enough time horizon, like as this model grows, it allows people to do what they love. Like, yeah, right now, like, it does like, financial outcomes affect a lot of the decision making that people do today. Like there might be the smartest, most motivated people in the world who want to really solve climate change, but they don't go and do that. Like how many friends do we have maybe that like actually go out and spend their entire life dedicated to like, humanitarian efforts? It's not because there's not enough good people in the world who want to do that. It's because the incentive structures of the world are not set up in a way for that to actually be something they can do and still afford to live. And I think this kind of changes that, where it becomes retroactive. It becomes like, it allows for funding to go into places that it never reached before, and it allows us to kind of fund this impact equals profit model, which I think is like it's going to be very, very like interesting to see how this plays out larger on the longer time horizon as well.
Yeah, it's a difficult proposition to tell people, well, you need to build for the greater good, but they need to put food on the table. They have maybe more pressing concerns. And so it's hard to operate in that system. So this is an alternative system, an alternative economy, if you will. It's an experiment. But yeah, it may seem a little wild-eyed, but hey, a lot of things throughout history were. But if you work towards these goals consistently, you'd be surprised what kind of changes can occur. I think we've covered some of the larger topics today. Anything else you want to talk about?
No, I just want to say, like, I update wise, like I'm moving into a new role at Optimism. I'll be focusing a lot more on the creator, NFT side, social side, and like consumer facing things. And my goal is just like a lot of what we have been talking about, like let's get the DevX up, let's get the UX up, let's make people build fun things on chain that everyday people want to use. And I'm really, really stoked at this opportunity and excited to build alongside all of you. I intend on doing it as openly as possible and really soliciting feedback from the community and everybody who's a part of this broader movement. So yeah, I just want to say that.
Yeah, congratulations on that, Binji. So what is your new role? What's your new title?
So the title is, I believe it is, I'm going to be leading NFT, but I believe that essentially extends towards like all consumer facing things. So because NFTs are essentially a consumer facing vehicle, and as such, I want to work on like how can we help the on ramps be as good as possible? How can we do like widespread, like how can we enable builders to build PWAs and bring things on mobile and a myriad of ideas. And also we'll be helping with OP chain launches. So if you guys know anybody who's interested in launching OP chain, please tell them to hit me up. Let's get people full sovereignty over their apps as well through all the different mechanisms that the OP stack enables.
Well, I don't think we could have found a better candidate for that role. Everybody who speaks to you, I know, comes away super optimistic and enthused. So congratulations on that. And thanks for coming on OP Radio today, Binji. I had a blast.
Thank you. Me too. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, Mac.
Awesome.
Also, I realized 49 OP radios. Mac, wow. You've been absolutely killing it. I just want to say like big shout out to Mac, because I remember when you first posted about this idea, and to not just have like executed, but done it 49 times is unreal. Like big hats off. Like, thank you for this. Thank you for providing this space for the community. And I hope to be there for the 1,000th one too.
Thank you so much. And yeah, we are rapidly approaching episode 100. We're going to have to do something special. I don't know what it is, but we'll have something in store. And yeah, something just, and this goes beyond crypto, but something I found in my own life is, sometimes these things can seem daunting at first, but just get started. If you're working on a project, if you want to contribute to the Optimism Collective, if you want to start a podcast, just get started, put in the reps, as they say, consistently. And you never know where that'll lead you. But I find, instead of sort of just deliberating and passing your time in a theoretical land, take action. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. Thank you, Binji. And we'll catch you next week. Stay optimistic, y'all.
See you guys.